The rest of the week went by in a blur for Jonathan. On Tuesday morning, he received his weapon and shield from Durin. The shield was a strange piece. It was embossed with enchanted stones in a pentagram shape. Growing up, people had told him pentagrams were satanic, but Durin explained that it was only when it was flipped upside down that it was symbolic of the Church of Satan. This is designed to absorb elements. Once absorbed, you can push the stored energy through its center, although, Durin hesitated, it will not be very effective against the vampires, as I only use soul spells. This will only capture elements. The sword was another source of fascination for Jonathan. It was a short-bladed weapon, with a guard barely wide enough to protect his hand. A metal rod protruded at a 90-degree angle from one side of the guard, then bent up to parallel the blade, allowing him to place his wand on it. He could also use it to trap blades. He went to Tiophianiar in the evening, where he learned about how his amulet was made. This involved reciting words and phrases from desired languages while focusing on their meaning. There was one thing about this that confused Jonathan, however. "You have made hundreds of these amulets over the years, haven't you?" "That is correct," came the enchanter's crackly reply. "Then you know a good amount of English and some of the other human languages by now, right?" The enchanter shrugged. "I am fluent in English, German, Norwegian, Finnish, and Swedish." Jonathan was impressed, but this only confused him further. "If you don't mind me asking, why do you need that amulet to speak to me if you already speak English fluently?" In answer, Tiophianiar put a finger to the scar on his neck. "When I was younger, I was hit with a lightning spell. It fried my vocal cords. The only way I can speak is with the necklace." On Wednesday, Kellen was happy to see him once again, saying how she was glad to have him back doing women's work. She had said it in a teasing way. Jonathan knew that women in Tiophianiar worked hard and truly earned their pay. He should know after working beside them. On Thursday, he once again got to meet szegvari. They worked side by side under the watch of their supervisor, Pitchell. It was a draining job, literally. Together they blasted flame into stones for hours on end, drinking mana potions all the while to keep going for longer. He also was shown how to cool the stones for cooling houses and for refrigeration. His stomach ached horribly by the time he finished. Knowing he would need to work up the muscle, Pitchell had given him frequent breaks, but even then it was grueling work. It was the hardest he had worked his appendix so far. Friday was less physically demanding, however. He went to the museum, and one of the historians on hand gave him a tour of the building. Interestingly, they had a human exhibit. The exhibit had mostly what he expected, showing displays with miniatures of pyramids and other famous buildings, armor, and copies of famous books. He suppressed a laugh when he noticed that another exhibit seemed to be a history of internet culture. It displayed pictures of people playing video games, popular joke formats, and pictures of videos. What he found the most hilarious was an instructional guide on how to give a bro fist. Seeing the display, Latin, the historian who was giving him the tour, rolled his eyes. "That would be Gilak's doing. He's our head of human history. I admire his spirit, but sometimes he finds the most ridiculous things of more importance than they really are." After the tour, he gave a brief history of Chofan the Wanderer and gave him a quick quiz on it. He also gave him a copy of a historical text for him to look at. "I don't expect you to learn every little detail of our history, but Chofir Durin did feel it necessary for you to learn the more important parts of it. However, if you ever want a more detailed history, you can study that book as well as speak with the other historians." Nothing was scheduled for Saturday, and like the Saturday prior, he was surprised by a knock on the door. He had just finished breakfast and was cleaning up his room from a week of neglect. Hearing the knock, he decided it wasn't so messy after all, and abandoned the mess to see who was visiting. As he suspected, the chauffeur was waiting just outside the door. "Morning, Durin. How are you today?" They worked their way through a standard greeting, then got straight to the point. "What brings you here this early?" He had woken up around 5 in the morning. Unable to go back to sleep, he had gotten an early breakfast, then decided to clean his room. It was almost 6 now. "I was wondering if you'd like to go on a hunt." He hadn't expected that. The chauffeur was always busy with important matters, attending meetings, checking the border, training, and any other security-related task. Jonathan couldn't see how he had time to hunt in between all of this. After some time, he realized he had just been standing without saying anything. Durin stood patiently all the while. "Sorry, you said a hunt?" When Durin nodded in confirmation, he continued. "What exactly did you have in mind?" "Well, we will not be hunting exactly. I am going on a hunting expedition with the head priest of the Vestial Tribe to act as a protector. They will be crossing the lower Nyalan to their hunting grounds south of the island of Tiophianiar." Already, several questions swirled around Jonathan's head, but Durin began to answer them before he had even asked. "The Vestial Tribe is one of the few tribes who did not merge with the others when Tiophianiar was formed. They are good allies of ours. In their tribe, they worship many gods and goddesses. High Priest Gintel is head over the entire religion. As for the hunt, we will be going to their sacred hunting grounds. We will not be hunting anything specific. Whatever suitable prey they can find will do." Nodding his head as he took in the information, Jonathan realized he still had one concern. "We are going to be hunting in dinosaur territory, right?" When the chauffeur nodded his head in the positive, he continued. "How dangerous will it be?" Durin considered for a moment, then shrugged. "Since the raptor population died down some years back, it has been a lot calmer. It is still dangerous, but I would say it is nothing we cannot handle. Though, considering the Vestial are not part of Tiophianiar, despite being within its borders, they are not part of my responsibility as chauffeur." He looked at his apprentice and shrugged. "That being said, you are not required to come along, but I thought I would ask. After all, it is not every day a human gets to see such creatures as we have here." Jonathan considered the offer, weighing the dangers in his mind. Durin seemed confident that all would end well, and that fact made up his mind. "I'll come along. It seems like too big an opportunity to miss." At the edge of the village was an open space. In a row was a long line of stone pillars standing somewhere around 3.5 feet in height. Their diameter was around 1/2 foot. The top of the pillars were slanted at a 45-degree angle, with circular holes placed in their centers. They walked along the line until Durin stopped before one of the pillars. Jonathan noticed that there were Tiophianian letters displayed on each, and he tapped his necklace so he could read the words. This one was simply marked Vestial, and as he watched, the chauffeur removed his amulet, slotting it into the hole. He placed a hand over it. Confused, Jonathan looked and noticed the blue light in the chauffeur's eyes. After a few moments, he picked up his amulet and redonned it. Then he filled in his apprentice. "The tribe is over a mile from here. To make it faster, we are going to use our amulets to teleport there." Jonathan picked up his neckwear and examined it. "These come in real handy, don't they?" Durin nodded. "The Tiophianian have used them for nearly 1,000 years. Now, take off yours, and I will explain how this works." Jonathan complied, placing his own amulet in the slot. "The pillar is carved from the same stone as the teleport platform in the Vestial village. Place your hand over the amulet and focus on an emotion you like. Then, try to imagine the mana flowing out of your hand and into the amulet." Joy magic was his best, so he focused on a feeling of joy. He tried to concentrate, but at first nothing happened. Then, he He felt the flow coming from his hand like water pouring out of his palm. After a few moments of this, he suddenly felt a blockage and cut off the flow. Looking down at the amulet, it seemed to him as if it was humming and shimmering with the mana held within. "Good job," Durin said as his pupil lifted it by the cord. "Now, I will go first. Watch the pillar for a purple light. That will indicate that I am on the receiving platform in the village, just like that one." He gestured, and Jonathan saw that there was a flat, large, round stone on the ground nearby. Nodding his understanding, the Tiophianiar continued. "Once the light is off, the platform will be free to receive you. Hold the amulet in your hand, and try to imagine the receiving platform in your mind. See yourself standing on it. I will call to you. Follow my voice and the others bidding you come." Jonathan wasn't sure he understood the last instruction, but he nodded anyway. "Okay, be ready." Durin lifted up his own amulet, his eyes once again glowing blue. Then, suddenly, he simply ceased to exist. Jonathan blinked in disbelief. He had expected something more, perhaps a flash of light or poof of a cloud, but not for him to just disappear as he had. It was very anticlimactic, the apprentice thought. He looked over at the pillar and noticed a small, little purple light glowing in the top right corner. Almost as soon as he noticed it, the light disappeared. Shrugging, he held the amulet in his hand and focused, closing his eyes. In his mind, he saw a flat rock with grass surrounding it. After some time, he felt like nothing was happening. Then it was as if he was floating. He opened his eyes and gasped in panic. His body was suspended in a never-ending nothing. Everywhere he looked there was nothing, not even the breeze that had been ruffling his hair a moment before. Voices began to penetrate the silence that engulfed him. "Come forth, child. You are welcome here. Come to us." Instinctively, as his mind reeled with shock and fear, he mistrusted the voices calling from the void. Mentally, he forced the voices down, trying to run, but his legs had no form here. Then he stopped as a familiar voice called from the same direction. "Do not fight it, Jonathan. Follow my voice." Durin's calm voice worked its way past the panic in his mind. Forcing himself to be calm, he focused on his mentor's voice. He imagined walking towards the voices, moving closer and closer. Then he felt as if his consciousness was moving in that direction, slowly at first. Without warning, it felt as if someone shoved him forward, and he stumbled off the receiving platform. He took several small steps, trying to recover his balance, when he felt someone catch and steady him. "I have you." Jonathan looked up into the stitched countenance of the Tiophianiar and smiled weakly. Then he doubled over and emptied his stomach on the freshly cut grass. "I should have warned you this would happen. Sorry, I did not prepare you better." Mildly annoyed, he waved Durin's apology aside. "It's okay. It wasn't like you did it on purpose." As he crouched over, taking deep breaths to steady his nerves, another voice broke in. "This is why we prefer walking, great warrior." Jonathan looked up to see a man, standing at ease, with a spear in his hand. He wore clothing that looked to be made of the same material as his own. Unlike his own, however, there was no pattern or color. It was the pale brown of the tree it was made from. His shirt had a large V-shaped collar with what appeared to be bits of feather lining it, reminding him of the fur-lined suits people wore on Earth. The man's skin was tanned from years of sun, giving him the look of a worker. He spoke Tiophianiar with a slight accent Jonathan did not recognize. Smiling, the man passed him a cup of water. He gratefully took the wooden cup and took a mouthful. Jonathan swished the liquid around his mouth, dispelling the remnants of the foul regurgitant. Then he spit it out, drinking the leftover water to ease his rebellious stomach. "Thank you," He returned the cup to the man, who placed it on a small table nearby. The man reached out a hand and Jonathan shook it, feeling the firm grip of his hand. "I am Hitloket. Welcome to Vestial Village, Earthchild." Jonathan wondered if he had been informed beforehand of his heritage, but decided that, more likely, he simply knew by looking at him that he was from Earth. "Nice to meet you, Hetlo. My name is Jonathan Moen." "Jonathan?" Hetlo frowned as he sounded out the name. Jonathan grinned and shrugged. "Close enough." Durin patted him on the back and looked over at the warrior. "This is my apprentice. He has been training under me for 2 weeks now, and will be joining us on the hunt." 2 weeks? Will he be able to defend himself? Hetlo looked a little concerned, but Durin reassured him. "He is a quick learner, and there will be 8 of us in the hunting party. Besides, with a reduced szegvari population, we should not have many predators to contend with." "The what?" Jonathan frowned at the unfamiliar term. "That is what we call the raptors. It was to honor a man named szegvari, who was eaten by one. Other than that, I do not remember why he was relevant." The Tiophianiar scratched his chin as he tried to recall why szegvari had been memorialized out of any other Tiophianiar who had suffered the same fate. His apprentice grimaced. "Why would you do that? That's so morbid." Durin shrugged. "It is a very common practice, actually. Naming the animal after the victim immortalizes them, as well as reminds everyone of the threat. This way, mothers can say, for example, 'Watch out for the szegvari. Do you remember what happened to szegvari?'" Jonathan shook his head in disbelief. Then he shrugged. Many children's rhymes such as the Muffin Man and Ring Around the Rosie were more disturbing in his opinion. Their conversation was interrupted as a second Vestialite approached. He wore the same exact garb as his companion. "High Priest Gintel is ready to receive you." They followed as the guard led them into the village. Jonathan looked around curiously, taking note of the village. It was even smaller than Kurasek, containing 10 or more buildings. The buildings were made out of logs, much like the log cabins he had vacationed in with his parents. Hearing tribe, he had ignorantly assumed that they would live in teepees or huts. Then he remembered that there had been tribes in North America that built houses similar to these. As he looked around, Durin caught note of his curiosity. "This is the first village the Vestial built," he began. Jonathan turned his head towards him, giving the Tiophianiar his undivided attention. "Originally, they had built huts from bundles of grass, using slender logs as supports. Later, they would learn to build the longer-lasting houses you see now." They came upon a large building near the center of the settlement. It was made like the rest, except the building had a large clay dome surmounting it. He could see large slits in the roof, and, as he watched, smoke billowed from them. As they reached the door, a deep voice called from within. "Enter." They opened the timber door to find a large chamber. In the center was a cheery fire. On the other side of it seemed to be some sort of altar, decorated with bones and feathers. A bleached dinosaur skull, Jonathan thought it may have been some large raptor, hung on the wall above the altar. Standing nearby the altar was the high priest. Jonathan was momentarily shocked by his appearance. He wore a more ornate garb than the guards, but it was mostly similar, with feathers on his cuffs and a belt covered in feathers around his waist. It was his hair and face that caught his attention. A large, singular braid started at the top center of his forehead, falling down to the base of his neck. The rest of his scalp was shaved bald. His beard was braided as well, with small bone beads adorning the strands. Around his eyes, soot had been smeared in a circle, giving him the look of empty sockets every time he blinked. Reminded him of what he had heard Vikings would have looked like. It was an intimidating sight that was ruined by the toothy grin that was showing. "Great warrior! He stepped forward and embraced Durin in a hug. Jonathan hid a grin. It reminded him of a child hugging their favorite stuffed animal. Then he disengaged and looked at the young man behind the chauffeur. "You did not tell me you had a son." Durin shook his head. "Unfortunately, that would not be possible unless we adopted. This is my apprentice, Jonathan Moen. He's coming along for his first hunting trip here. Originally, he is from Earth." The high priest smiled at Jonathan now. "You will not be the only one. My son and nephew will be joining us as well. It is a test of manhood for young men in the tribe to go on this hunt. Perhaps there will be 3 men at the end of this trip." The door opened to admit a group of 4 people into the building. Hetlo led in another man and 2 boys, who looked to be around Jonathan's own age. The high priest stepped forward to make introductions. "Jonathan, you have met my 2 guards, Hetlo and Jezgia. This here with them is my brother Zemtel and his son Ekal. And this is my son Aletra." He pointed out each one as he mentioned their names. They shook hands with the chauffeur and chaufferette, trading pleasantries as they did so. "First things first." High Priest Gintel walked over to the altar and took a small clay jar from its top. "We must observe the rites. Come forward and receive your marks." The 2 children, Ekal and Aletra, walked forward. They both came to their knees in front of the altar. Jonathan looked on with interest, waiting to see what the ritual entailed. The high priest looked at him curiously. "Are you not going to join us, Jonathan?" Not expecting to be asked to join in, he hesitated for a moment. Durin nudged him with an elbow. "Go ahead. They love for outsiders to join in." Grinning, Jonathan moved forward to his place on the floor. Gintel squatted down in front of his nephew, placing a hand on his forehead. He closed his eyes, seeming to be in deep concentration. Then his eyes flicked open, and he drew a rough sketch of a bird's head on his nephew's forehead, using the suet from the clay jar. "Screech a bird," he announced. Ekal grinned, and Aletra reached over and playfully punched his shoulder. "Should have known. You have always been a prankster." His cousin grinned back at him. Then it was Aletra's turn. After a moment, the high priest announced, "Vitinya." The rough image he left on his son's head looked to be some sort of crocodile. Both boys nodded at this, then looked at Jonathan. High Priest Gintel knelt down in front of him, placing his hand on the boy's forehead. His lips slightly moved as he concentrated. The chauffeur stared into the eerie black circles of his closed eyes. For almost a minute, they sat there in silence as the priest focused. Suddenly, his eyes flicked open, startling Jonathan, who had been entranced by the face paint. Looking more carefully at him, seeming to look at him with new respect, Gintel drew something on the apprentice's forehead. Jonathan couldn't see it, but he had drawn a dinosaur with an elongated head and short beak. At the back of its head, following the spine, were sawtooth-looking attachments. "Bekeraton." They all looked with reverence as he spoke the word. It meant nothing to Jonathan, and he looked up in confusion at the high priest. "Bekeraton is the god of destiny and fortune. Any who earn his mark are said to be destined for great things." Jonathan had to frown at that. He was a strong believer that one wrote their own destiny, but then he always found prophecy and the idea of a chosen one fascinating, so he put on a smile. Each boy, including Jonathan, was presented with a steel-tipped hunting spear. "Now that the officialdom is out of the way," Gintel picked up his own spear as he addressed the group. He turned with a broad smile. "Let the hunt begin." Bring this over again. Oh, Scheiße. That's not what I wanted. I want it right there. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, I need to get a proper desk, man.